Imagine this. On the quiet evening of August 31st, 1939. Just before midnight, a small group of men in Polish uniforms storms a German radio station near the border in Gliwice. They force their way in, fire shots into the air, broadcast a brief anti-German message in Polish, then disappear into the night. Left behind on the ground are boaters dressed as Polish saboteurs. But in reality, concentration camp prisoners murdered for the scene. This was no random attack. It was a carefully planned deception, the most infamous of several staged incidents that night. The next morning, at 4:45 a.m. on September 1st, 1939, the world heard the roar of engines and the thunder of artillery as German forces crossed into Poland from multiple directions. The invasion had begun. Why does this matter? Because that false flag operation, known as the Gliwice Incident, was the final pretext for launching the largest war in human history. One single staged event, costing innocent lives, helped ignite a conflict that would claim over 70 million lives, redraw maps, and reshape the world forever. It wasn't just about one border crossing, it was the culmination of years of broken promises, rising aggression, and failed diplomacy. The pilot analogy you might think of where a damaged plane keeps flying despite impossible odds mirrors. The fragile peace of the 1930s, Europe had been limping along after World War I, patched together by treaties that many saw as unfair. By 1939, the cracks were too deep to hold. One more push, and the whole structure collapsed. The shock isn't just in the scale of what followed, but in how preventable it seemed yet wasn't. Leaders had warnings. Annexations without resistance. Pacts signed in secret. Warnings ignored. On that September morning, as German troops advanced, Polish defenders at places like Westerplatte held out against overwhelming odds, their resistance a symbol of defiance amid chaos. The first shots fired from the battleship Schleswig-Holstein signaled the end of illusions. Peace had been fragile, like a plane riddled with unseen damage, still airborne until it wasn't. What began as a border incident exploded into a global catastrophe, pulling in empires, ideologies, and millions of ordinary people. This is the true beginning, not just a date on a calendar, but a moment when deception met ambition, and the world changed forever. The invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939, did not happen in isolation. It was rooted in the unresolved tensions from the end of World War I in 1918. The Treaty of Versailles had imposed harsh terms on Germany territorial losses, military restrictions, and massive reparations which bred resentment and economic hardship during the Great Depression of the 1930s. In this climate, extremist regimes rose to power. In Germany, the Nazi Party gained control in 1933, promising national revival and reversal of Versailles. Similar movements grew in Italy and Japan, driven by expansionist goals. Throughout the 1930s, aggressive actions tested international resolve. Germany remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936, annexed Austria in 1938, the Anschluss, and then took the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia via the Munich Agreement. In September 1938, Britain and France, hoping to avoid war through appeasement, but in March 1939, Germany occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia, exposing the policy's failure. Poland, with guarantees from Britain and France, now faced direct threat, especially over the free city of Danzig and the Polish corridor, areas with mixed populations and historical disputes. Meanwhile, secret diplomacy shifted the balance. On August 23, 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression agreement with the hidden protocol dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, including Poland. This removed the fear of a two-front war for Germany and allowed both powers to act without immediate interference from each other. Tensions escalated rapidly. Border incidents were reported, some real, many exaggerated or staged. The Gliwice operation and similar false flags provided the public justification. Claims of Polish aggression against ethnic Germans. Poland mobilized, but its army, though brave, faced modern German forces equipped with tanks, aircraft, and coordinated tactics later called blitzkrieg. Britain and France had pledged support, but their preparations were incomplete. As August ended, ultimatums flew, but diplomacy collapsed. Hitler ordered the invasion to begin at dawn on September 1st. At 4:45 a.m., German ships, planes, and ground forces struck. Schleswig-Holstein opened fire on Westerplatte, a Polish military depot in Danzig. Air raids hit cities, and armored divisions surged forward. This event was important because it transformed regional aggression into a continental war. When Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3rd, the conflict became World War II in Europe. The invasion exposed the fragility of peace mechanisms, like the League of Nations, and showed how unchecked expansion could ignite global catastrophe. It set the stage for 4 years of suffering, occupation, and resistance across continents. The human cost began. Immediately, civilians fleeing, soldiers fighting against impossible odds, families torn apart. This background explains not just why the war started, but how a chain of decisions and failures led to that fateful morning. September 1st, 1939, dawned with a chilling silence, broken at precisely 4:45 a.m. across the Polish frontier. The night sky erupted in flashes of gunfire and exploding shells. German forces, approximately 1.5 million soldiers, supported by more than 2,000 tanks, and close to 2,000 aircraft, surged forward from 3 main directions: the north through East Prussia and Pomerania, the west from Germany proper, and the south from Slovakia and former Czechoslovak territory. This was the opening move of Blitzkrieg, the Lightning War. Coordinated strikes where armored divisions punched through weak points, infantry followed to secure gains, and the Luftwaffe provided devastating close air support with Ru-87 Stuka-Div bombers, screaming down to terrorize defenders and destroy infrastructure. Poland's army, roughly 1 million strong, including reserves, stood ready but outmatched in equipment and organization. Many units still relied on World War I-era tactics, horses for transport, and limited mechanization. Yet, resistance began immediately. At the isolated military depot on the Westerplatte Peninsula in the Free City of Danzig, a garrison of just 210 Polish soldiers faced the opening salvo. The prepositioned German battleship Schleswig-Holstein, ostensibly on a courtesy visit, opened fire with its 280mm guns at point-blank range. The bombardment shook the earth, but the Poles held their positions in concrete bunkers and trenches. For 7 grueling days, they repelled repeated infantry assaults and further shelling, inflicting significant casualties and delaying German advances along the coast. Their stand became an early emblem of unyielding courage against overwhelming force. Elsewhere, the fighting unfolded with brutal speed. In the corridor in western Poland, German panzers raced ahead, encircling pockets of resistance. Polish cavalry brigades, phone romanticized in later accounts, did not charge tanks with lances, as myth suggested. Instead, they used mounted mobility to maneuver through forests and fields, launching effective dismounted attacks on infantry and supply lines. Before withdrawing, in one documented clash near Makro on September 1st, a cavalry unit surprised and temporarily halted elements of the German 4th Panzer Division, destroying several vehicles before pulling back. Twists arrived swiftly and mercilessly. On September 3rd, at 11 a.m., Britain declared war on Germany, followed by France at 5 p.m. the same day. Yet no substantial military action followed in the West. The period became known as the Phony War, with Allied forces remaining largely static behind the Maginot Line while Poland fought alone. Then, on September 17th, the greatest shock came. Soviet troops crossed Poland's eastern border in force, claiming to protect ethnic Ukrainians and Belarusians, but fulfilling the secret territorial division outlined in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact's protocols. The two-front assault sealed Poland's fate. Defenders, already stretched thin, now faced encirclement from both sides. Warsaw, the capital, endured the heaviest punishment. From September 8th onward, the Luftwaffe conducted round-the-clock bombing raids, targeting military sites but hitting civilian areas indiscriminately. Fires raged through wooden districts. Water supplies failed. Hospitals overflowed. Civilians huddled in cellars and makeshift shelters as masonry crumbled overhead. Despite the terror, acts of heroism multiplied. Polish fighter pilots, flying obsolete PZLP.11 aircraft against modern Messerschmitt Bf-109s, scored surprising victories in dogfights, downing dozens of German planes in the opening days. Before attrition took its toll on Tigrond, a small force had risen to fewer than 720 men. Under Captain Władysław, Radzienice held a cluster of bunkers against an entire German corps for 3 days. September 8th to 10th, their stand delayed the advance toward Warsaw, allowing thousands of Polish troops to withdraw eastward. Losses accumulated at a horrifying pace. In the first week alone, thousands of soldiers fell in ambushes, artillery duels, and airstrikes. Civilian deaths mounted from bombings and strafing runs on roads clogged with refugees. German coordination using radios for real-time adjustments between tanks, planes, and infantry proved decisive against Polish forces still dependent on couriers and field telephones. Polish Ujukumasmbilendua M anti-tank rifles WZ-35 claimed some panzer kills at close range, and infantry ambushes occasionally disrupted supply columns. But the tide could not be turned. By mid-September, major Polish armies were surrounded in pockets. The Poznań army launched a bold counteroffensive at the Bzur River from September 9th to 22nd, temporarily pushing back German units and destroying equipment before being crushed by reinforcements. Encirclement tightened around Warsaw. Street fighting erupted as German troops entered the suburbs. Starvation set in. Bread rations dwindled to scraps. After relentless bombardment that left much of the city in ruins, the Polish commander, General Julius Ramel, authorized capitulation on September 27th to prevent further slaughter of civilians. The formal surrender took effect the next day. Scattered resistance continued. The last large engagement unfolded near Koch, where General Franciszek Kleeberg's independent operational group fought until October 6th, before laying down arms honoring terms that preserved dignity for the defeated. Poland as a sovereign state vanished from the map. Germany annexed Western territories outright, incorporating them into the Reich. The Soviet Union took the East. A central zone became the general government under harsh occupation administration. The human cost scarred generations. Estimates place Polish military deaths in the campaign at around 66,000, with over 130,000 wounded. Civilian losses from bombing, executions, and chaos added tens of thousands more in those first weeks. Mass expulsions, forced labor, and early atrocities began almost immediately. This September campaign established the war's grim template: swift mechanized conquest, aerial terror against cities, civilian suffering on a massive scale, and the collision of totalitarian systems against determined but outgunned defenders. What started as a border invasion had, in barely 5 weeks, erased one nation and set the stage for 6 years of global devastation. The climax of the September campaign arrived in the final days of September 1939, centered on the battered capital of Warsaw. By mid-month, German forces had encircled the city, cutting off major supply routes. From September 8th onward, The Luftwaffe intensified its assault, sending wave after wave of bombers Hinkel He-111s and Dornier Do-17s dropping high explosive and incendiary payloads. Entire neighborhoods vanished in firestorms. Wooden tenements burned uncontrollably, sending thick black smoke across the skyline. Civilians, unable to flee, sheltered in basements, sewers, and the ruins of collapsed buildings. Hospitals, marked with red crosses, were hit repeatedly. Doctors operated by candlelight as electricity failed and water pipes burst. Food stocks dwindled to almost nothing. People boiled wallpaper, paste, and scraped glue from posters for meager sustenance. The daily death toll from bombing, artillery, and starvation climbed into the thousands. On Tigron, Polish defenders fought with whatever remained. Regular army units, home army volunteers, and even civilian militias manned barricades of overturned trams, sandbags, and machine gun nests in shattered windows and anti-tank guns, positioned in courtyards, exacted a heavy price on advancing German infantry. Street fighting turned vicious. Soldiers moved house to house, clearing rooms with grenades and bayonets. In some sectors, Polish troops launched limited counterattacks, briefly retaking blocks before being forced back by superior numbers and firepower. Yet every day the perimeter shrank. German heavy artillery, 150mm howitzers, and 210mm mortar pounded key strongpoints relentlessly. The iconic Royal Castle, a symbol of Polish history, was reduced to a smoldering skeleton. Amid the chaos, individual acts of courage stood out. Medics risked their lives to drag wounded from open streets under machine gun fire. Messengers dashed through shell fire to deliver orders. One documented moment captured the spirit of resistance. A group of young scouts, barely teenagers, carried ammunition crates through burning alleys to frontline positions, refusing to abandon their posts even as buildings collapsed around them. Polish anti-aircraft gunners, using 40mm Bofors guns, managed to bring down several low-flying aircraft, their tracer rounds stitching the sky in desperate defiance. By September 25th, the situation became untenable. Warsaw's water supply was cut, fires raged unchecked, and ammunition for artillery and small arms was nearly exhausted. German commanders issued ultimatums, demanding surrender or promising total destruction. On September 26th, after another day of ferocious bombardment, the Polish commander in Warsaw, General Julius Rommel, convened his staff. The decision was agonizing. Continued resistance would mean the annihilation of the remaining civilian population, hundreds of thousands still trapped inside the city. To spare further mass slaughter, surrender terms were sought. On September 27th, after negotiations, the city capitulated. At 2 p.m. the next day, German troops entered the center in orderly columns, while Polish units stacked arms in designated squares. The white and red flag came down from the last remaining strong points. With Warsaw fallen, organized resistance across Poland unraveled rapidly. Scattered units continued fighting in isolated pockets. In the east, some formations attempted to break through to Romania or Hungary, hoping to continue the struggle from abroad. But Soviet forces blocked most escape routes. The final large-scale engagement took place near the village of Kok, southeast of Warsaw. General Franciszek Kleberges, Independent Operational Grupparont. 18,000 men, including cavalry and infantry, had evaded encirclement and regrouped. From September 29th to October 6th, they fought a series of delaying actions against pursuing German divisions. Kleberg's troops inflicted notable casualties and destroyed equipment, but ammunition and supplies ran out. On October 6th, after a final stand, Kleberg ordered his men to cease fire and surrender under honorable terms. This marked the official end of the Polish campaign. The resolution was stark and immediate. Poland ceased to exist as an independent state. Germany annexed large western territories. Danzig was Prussia, Waterland, and parts of Upper Silesia, incorporating them directly into the Reich. The remaining central areas became the general government, a zone of occupation intended for exploitation and eventual Germanization. In the east, the Soviet Union annexed territories up to the agreed line in the secret protocols of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, including Vilnius, handed later to Lithuania, eastern Galicia, and Volhynia. Within weeks, mass arrests, deportations, and executions began in both zones. Hundreds of thousands of Poles were sent to labor camps, while others faced forced resettlement or worse. The campaign's conclusion carried profound lessons. It demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of blitzkrieg speed coordination and combined arms overwhelming traditional defenses. It exposed the futility of appeasement. Earlier concessions had emboldened aggression rather than preventing it. Most tragically, it revealed the human cost when diplomacy fails and aggression goes unchecked. Civilians bore the brunt, tens of thousands killed in Warsaw alone from bombing and shelling, with total Polish losses in the campaign estimated at over 66,000 military dead, 134,000 wounded, and countless civilian fatalities. The fall of Poland did not end the war. It expanded Italiano. Britain and France, now formally at war, entered a period of relative inactivity. In the West, a so-called phony war, while the mechanisms of global conflict accelerated. In 1940, the invasions of Denmark, Norway, the Low Countries, and France followed. The pattern set in September 1939, rapid conquest, aerial terror, civilian suffering would repeat across Europe and beyond. The resolution of the Polish campaign was not a victory for any side in the moral sense. It was the opening chapter of a 6-year tragedy that claimed over 70 million lives worldwide. From the first shells at Westerplatte to the final surrender at Koch, the events showed how quickly peace can collapse when resolve weakens and aggression gains momentum. The defenders' courage, though defeated in the field, left a legacy of resistance that would inspire underground movements and exiled forces in the years to come. The true cost, however, remained etched in the ruins of cities, the grief of families, and the silence that followed the guns. Reflecting on September 1st, 1939, the start of World War II reminds us of war's devastating reality. It began not with grand battles, but with deception, ambition, and the failure of nations to stop aggression early. Millions lost lives, homes, and futures. The conflict exposed humanity's capacity for destruction and resilience. From the defenders at Westerplatte holding out against impossible odds, to civilians enduring bombings, stories of endurance stand out. The war ended in 1945 with immense sacrifice, leading to new institutions like the United Nations to prevent repeats. Today, it teaches vigilance against division, propaganda, and unchecked power. Peace requires constant effort, empathy across borders, and standing against injustice. T. Evans of 1939 show how quickly calm can shatter, urging us to value dialogue and humanity above all. We have written the sources from which we got this story in the description of this video. We have always been and will be supporters of the oppressed, regardless of their color, race, or country. This world and its creator are also with the oppressed. If this forgotten story of how World War II truly began moved you, like the video to show support. Comment below your thoughts. What surprises you most about the lead up to September 1st, 1939. Subscribe WWII Focused for more deep dives into overlooked World War II moments and historical truths. See you in the next one.